When my son looked me in the eye and asked if I had to accept those gifts, I didn't know whether to protect him or protect my own shattered heart. The words hung there between us, thin and trembling, like the last thread holding a family together. The kitchen smelled faintly of burnt coffee and wilted lilies, leftovers from the flowers she'd brought me last week. On the table, the wrappers of her expensive gifts gleamed under the soft light. Gold ribbons, sleek boxes, untouched perfumes. They looked out of place here, among the chipped mug and the old lace curtains. Marcus sat across from me, elbows on the table, eyes red from whatever storm had come before. He wasn't angry. It would have been easier if he were. No, his voice shook the way a child's does when he realizes his parent might be human after all. "Mom," he said quietly, "did you ever think she might have been trying to buy your love?" There was no accusation, only pain, and that made it worse. I opened my mouth, but words felt foreign. Every memory I had of Lena, the dinners she helped me cook, the little boxes she left on my doorstep, the way she hugged me too long rushed through me like wind through an open door. I remembered thinking I must have done something right to deserve such kindness. But at that moment, sitting in my worn kitchen chair, I wondered if I had mistaken performance for affection. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind pressed against the window, carrying the faint sound of laughter from neighbors' life moving forward while mine paused in strange disbelief. To understand how we found ourselves there, you have to know what kind of mother I tried to be. My name is Sylvia Winslow. I turned 56 last winter, though most mornings when my knees groan before the kettle starts singing, I feel a touch older. I live in the same small Arkansas town I was born in, tucked at the end of Maple Road where the oak trees bend low enough to whisper to one another. Folks here know me as the seamstress with quick hands and a patch of sunlight in her window, a woman who can mend torn fabric and, sometimes, torn spirits. I wasn't always alone in this little house. For 32 years, it was filled with the steady hum of my husband, Daniel, who built furniture out of sturdy oak and gentleness itself. He passed 12 years ago, a heart attack that came one September morning while he was sanding a rocking chair for a newborn down the street. After that, the hammering stopped. The house grew quiet, and I filled the silence with my sewing machine's rhythmic hum. There's a kind of comfort in thread and needle, in piecing small things back together when life feels too big to fix. Our son, Marcus, was my saving grace. From the day he came home swaddled in a blanket too small for his kicking legs, there was laughter in his eyes. He had Daniel's patience and my stubbornness, a combination that both exhausted and amazed me. I still remember the echo of his boyish laughter bouncing off these walls, louder than the summer cicadas. Every evening I'd fry chicken in my cast-iron skillet while he sat at the counter doing homework, legs dangling, tongue poking out as he parsed through arithmetic. We didn't have much money. Lord knows there were more times I boiled ham bones for a second round of soup than I care to count, but we had warmth. A love threaded through the ordinary, the smell of starch and soap on freshly ironed clothes, the soft glow of Daniel's lamp as he read before bed, the creak of Marcus's bedroom door when he'd slip in after curfew, pretending he'd been asleep all along. After Daniel passed, Marcus became the man of the house far too soon. I tried to hide my grief in busy hands, but Marcus saw through it. He'd fix himself cereal on mornings I couldn't find my strength, leave little notes that said, "Mom, you're enough." I kept every one of them in a tin box beside my sewing machine. He gave my days shape, like the chalk lines I draw on fabric before cutting. Years passed, and I poured myself into making sure he didn't carry the weight of our small world alone. When he earned a scholarship and headed off to college, I smiled so wide my cheeks ached all the way home. But when I came back to an empty doorway, I set out 2 plates for dinner out of habit and cried over the one I put back in the cabinet. That's the thing about raising a good man, you teach him to fly, then realize your heart has to learn to live without the sound of his wings. The town watched him grow, proud of him as if he were everybody's boy. When he graduated and got a job in the city, neighbors stopped by to say, "You did good, Sylvia. You raised a fine man." I held their words like keepsakes, rubbing them smooth with gratitude. Yet when I lay in bed at night, the hollowness beside me whispered of something still missing, not romance, exactly, but family. The table was too quiet, the holidays felt thinner without new laughter echoing through the house. I used to pray that one day a young woman would come along who'd love Marcus the way I did, fiercely, but kindly. I dreamed she'd call me Mama, ask for recipes, maybe sit with me over sweet tea to talk about life. It's funny how dreams can blur into need when you've been lonely long enough. I suppose I wanted to belong to someone again, even if only by extension. So when Marcus told me he'd met someone special, I thanked God, not knowing how much that answered prayer would test my heart. The first time I met Lena was one of those early spring afternoons when the air feels undecided, half warmth, half chill. I remember standing in my kitchen with my apron on, brushing a bit of flour off my hands as the clock over the stove ticked louder than usual. Marcus had called that morning, his voice quick with excitement. "She's different, Mom," he'd said. "You'll see." I'd heard those words before from friends' children, but Marcus wasn't one to get carried away easily. The way his tone softened when he spoke her name told me it was serious. I'd been cooking since dawn, nervous energy guiding my hands. There was cornbread cooling on the windowsill, roast chicken slow basting in the oven, and collard greens simmering on the stove. I even set out my best tablecloth, the lace one Daniel's mother crocheted decades ago. By the time they arrived, the house smelled like garlic, butter, and anticipation. When Marcus walked in, his shoulders straightened as if this house still meant something sacred. Behind him stood Lena. She was petite, with almond-shaped eyes and a smile that was both eager and cautious. She wore a cream blouse tucked into tailored slacks, her nails a glossy pearl, her perfume a soft jasmine that trailed behind her like memory. She carried a wrapped box silver paper, gold ribbon, and when she handed it to me, her hands trembled just slightly. "This is just a small something," she said, voice melodic, a whisper of nerves hiding beneath practiced charm. Inside was a silk scarf, delicate and cool against my fingers, the kind you'd only wear on special occasions. "It reminded me of you," she added quickly, as though hoping to predict my gratitude. I laughed, touched by the gesture. "Well, thank you, dear. But you didn't need to bring me anything just yet, your company's a gift already." She smiled wider, relief loosening her posture. "Oh, I insist. I love giving gifts. It's how I show care." We sat down for dinner, and for a while, everything was easy. Marcus told stories from work, his eyes darting toward Lena every few seconds like he was making sure she was proud of him. She listened intently, dabbing her lips gently with a napkin between bites, nodding at every sentence. She complimented my chicken 3 times before finishing her plate. I liked that, her politeness, her sweetness. Still, something about her kept me watchful, the way she kept straightening the silverware whenever conversation stalled. After dessert, I made tea. She pulled a tin of expensive leaves from her tote and handed it to me. "This blend is my favorite, it's handpicked, imported from Kyoto," she said. "You shouldn't have to drink the grocery store kind." Her tone was innocent enough, but I felt my cheeks warm. I'd been drinking the same brand from the corner store for 20 years. It didn't occur to me until later that she hadn't meant harm. Still, a small part of me shrank inside. Later that night, after they left, I found myself standing over the sink, running my thumb along the scarf's edge. Its softness reminded me of generosity, and yet, something about it felt heavy, like it expected to be admired more than loved. Marcus called the next day. "Mom, wasn't she great?" His voice glowed through the line. I told him she was beautiful and kind, and I meant it. Then he chuckled. "Yeah, she's got expensive taste, though. She tried to pay for our dinner last night even though I told her I had it covered. She said she likes to invest in people." His words sat strange with me. Investing like love was currency, like affection had returns. I told myself that's how younger people talk these days, all business and confidence. I told myself not to read too deep. Over the next few weeks, Lena visited often. She'd bring small things each time, a hand lotion from Paris, a tea set she claimed she'd found on sale, a tiny gold charm shaped like a thimble because she'd remembered I so. I was touched, truly, though I worried about her spending so much. Once or twice I tried to refuse, but she'd wave me off. "Please, I insist. It makes me happy." Still, every gift found a quiet corner in the house that didn't quite belong, The scarf draped over a chair I never sat in, the tea tin collecting dust beside the cheaper box I still preferred. Sometimes, when Marcus wasn't around, I noticed the little things others might have missed. The way Lena's hands fluttered when conversation lulled, as though afraid of silence. The faint crease between her brows whenever I mentioned how Marcus used to patch his jeans instead of buying new ones. She'd laugh politely, but her gaze would flick toward the clock, as if the story stretched longer than she could bear. One afternoon we sat over tea, the imported kind, and she asked about my sewing work. "Do people here even pay much for that?" she asked, not unkindly, but gently uninformed. I smiled through the sting, explaining how repairs kept me busy enough. She just nodded, her manicured fingers circling the rim of her cup. We were both trying, I think, her to belong, me to be gracious. By the time the dishes were done and her laughter had faded into the evening hum of cicadas, something inside me felt uneven, like a picture frame just slightly off-center. I wanted to like her, and I did. She was thoughtful, attentive, and clearly loved my son. Still, each time she left, her scent lingered longer than it should have, as though marking territory instead of memory. At first, her gifts felt like kindness. But kindness shouldn't leave you wondering who it was really for. It started small, innocent enough to ignore. Lena brought over a bracelet one Saturday afternoon, gold-toned with tiny pearls that shimmered when they caught the light. "I saw this and thought of you," she said, fastening it around my wrist before I could protest. I stared down at it, delicate and clearly expensive. "Honey, this is too much," I murmured, gently trying to unclip it. She shook her head quickly, almost panicked. "No, no, don't do that. You deserve something nice. You've given Marcus everything, let me give you something too." Her eyes were wide, almost pleading. I smiled to ease her discomfort, but as the bracelet hung loose on my arm, a sliver of guilt slipped under my skin. Gratitude should feel light. This felt weighted, like I'd accepted a debt I didn't remember owing. Over the next few weeks, the gifts multiplied. A new phone, mine had a cracked screen, and Lena insisted it was time for an upgrade. A luxury bag for special occasions. A wool coat that still smelled faintly of a designer store, far above my typical means. Each item came wrapped in gleaming paper, each delivery accompanied by the same reasoning: "Your family now." I tried to refuse gently, saying things like, "Oh, honey, that's too sweet, but I don't need that." Still, she'd place the boxes on my kitchen table, right beside the flour tin and sewing scissors, and say, "Please, Mrs. Winslow, it's my way of saying thank you." Eventually, she stopped asking and simply left things behind after visits. I noticed Marcus's tone when I mentioned it. "She just likes to show appreciation, Mom," he said, half laughing, as if I were being old-fashioned. "It's normal for her, she's generous." His voice carried that youthful certainty that turns concern into nagging. He was happy, and I didn't want to chip away at that. Still, I caught myself watching Lena differently. One evening, while setting the table for dinner, I saw how she placed her purse down carefully, its gold clasp catching the light, a delicate performance in itself. She smiled, complimented the flower arrangement I'd put together, then adjusted it slightly, not enough to insult, but enough to rewrite the scene. As we ate, she turned to Marcus and asked casually, "Have you spoken to your boss about that promotion yet? You deserve to be higher up by now." Marcus laughed softly. "I will when the timing's right." She took a sip of wine, her expression unreadable. "You should. People notice when you don't reach for things." The room felt suddenly colder, though the oven was still humming. Marcus brushed it off. I pretended not to notice. But as I cleared the plates, her comment replayed in my mind. Not because it was rude, because it sounded rehearsed, as though she was learning her lines for a play about ambition and reputation. My pride wrestled with my gratitude. These gifts were meant to make me feel cherished, yet somehow they made me feel small. I began to wonder if my home, my hand-me-down furniture, my second-hand dishes embarrassed her. The thought was sharp and shameful, but it grew roots quickly. One evening, I decided to sort through the gifts. I opened my wardrobe and found boxes neatly stacked like misplaced confidence. The phone sat in its packaging, never activated, The coat still wore its tag. I slid them into the bottom drawer. I told myself I'd use them someday, when it felt right. But deep down, I knew someday really meant never. When Lena came by the following weekend, she noticed my old, scuffed phone on the counter. "Why aren't you using the new one?" she asked, lips curved but voice edged. "Oh, I haven't had time to set it up yet," I lied, and she tilted her head half smile, half disbelief. "Well, don't wait too long. That screen looks awful. People might think you don't care for nice things." The way she said people lingered with me, as if some invisible audience were watching both of us, grading how well we played our parts. Later that week, I stopped by Marcus's apartment to drop off a quilt I'd made for his bed. Lena wasn't home, but her handbag was on the sofa with a folded receipt sticking out. I didn't mean to look. I told myself it was accidental, but curiosity snapped at me. The receipt was from a boutique downtown, the same name printed on the tag of the coat she'd given me. My eyes traced the list of items: returned scarf, bracelet, perfume, coat, each name followed by store credit. For a moment, I thought perhaps she bought duplicates, but a strange nausea rose in me when I saw dates matching the very days she'd gifted them. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hands. Did she return the gifts after taking photos? Was it all for show, proof of generosity without the cost? I told myself to stop imagining things, to respect privacy. But the image of those gold foil boxes flashed behind my eyes, each one emptier than the last. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Maybe she had her reasons. Maybe it was just how people did things now, everything for appearance, for social currency. Still, I felt foolish for being fooled. I turned the words "invest in people" over in my mind like stones in my palm, cold and polished. Days later, the tension found its way into our conversations. Lena dropped by to show me a brochure for a charity gala she hoped Marcus would attend with her. "Networking," she said brightly, "will help him meet the right people." I nodded politely, though my chest tightened. When she stepped outside to take a call, I kept folding napkins at the kitchen counter, trying to focus on the soft linen beneath my fingertips. Then her voice drifted through the half-open window. "Yes, she loved it," Lena said, a light laugh following. "Of course. It's all about making an impression for the future." The words froze me mid-fold. My fingers stilled on the fabric, even the clock seemed to pause. Maybe she wasn't talking about me. Maybe she meant something else: a business deal, a client, anything. But the way her tone softened when she said she echoed too specifically to dismiss. When she came back inside, I smiled as naturally as I could. She looked radiant, unaware that something inside me had quietly shifted. I spent the rest of the evening listening harder than speaking, watching more than engaging. That night, I gathered every unopened gift into a single box. I didn't throw them away, I wasn't ready for that. But I tucked them deep inside my closet, like secrets best left unseen. I told myself I was being paranoid. But a mother's heart always recognizes when something's off balance. It happened on a Thursday evening, near the end of May, the kind of soft, amber hour when sunlight slips quietly through the curtains and makes even dust look holy. I was stitching a hem for a neighbor's dress, the needle dancing in and out beneath the glow of my little desk lamp. Marcus and Lena had come by earlier in the afternoon. They'd said they were running an errand, but their hurried expressions hinted at something unspoken. I tried not to pry. Grown children deserve that space, but as the house fell silent behind their departure, a strange unease began tapping on the back of my heart. The phone rang around 5:30. It was Marcus's Uncle Raymond, Daniel's older brother, the one with a cabin out by the lake and a portfolio full of investments I never understood a lick of. Raymond had always adored Marcus, treating him like his own. He chuckled through the speaker. "Sylvia, I didn't know Marcus was engaged. Lena called me herself about meeting for dinner this weekend. Said she wanted to discuss a business concept that could change things for the family. Intelligent girl, that one." My needle stopped mid-stitch. "She called, on her own?" I asked. "Oh yes, very polite. Mentioned some investment in small fashion vendors. Said she thought your tailoring work could use scaling." My grip tightened on the phone. Scaling? I wasn't a business project, just an old woman mending tears where she could. Raymond, oblivious to my pause, went on happily about how refreshing it was to meet an ambitious young woman. I managed a polite laugh, said goodbye, and hung up, then sat staring at my hands, speckled with age, the way the gold thread glinted between my fingers like an accusation. That evening I cooked dinner, though appetite escaped me. Marcus hadn't returned my calls, so I left the porch light burning, a silent invitation back to calmness. When the driveway finally filled with his headlights around 9, the sense of relief was quickly replaced by the sharp edge of their voices cutting through the night. They didn't know I could hear from the kitchen. The window was cracked open to let the summer air through. "Why would you go behind my back like that?" Marcus's voice hurt yet soft, the way men sound when they still hope to be wrong. "I didn't go behind your back," Lena hissed, her breath quick. "I was trying to help. Your uncle has resources. Connections. I thought he could guide us." "Guide us where?" "Into a deal you never told me about." A door slammed the car, maybe. Then footsteps on the gravel. Her words tumbled out faster, almost panicked. "Marcus, I just wanted to make a good impression. Your mom looks at me like I'm too much sometimes. I thought if I did something meaningful, she'd see I care about this family." My heartbeat drummed in my ears. I leaned closer to the window, feeling shame at my eavesdropping but powerless to stop. What does calling my uncle about business have to do with caring about my mother? Marcus demanded. His voice cracked on mother, and I felt each syllable like a small, clean wound. There was silence, then Lena's voice smaller now. "You never said she's so set in her ways, Marcus. She's lovely, but I can't connect with her when she refuses anything nice. I just tried to bridge the gap. You make good money now, but she lives like she's still struggling." I gasped before I knew I had. The sound escaped me, a tiny, involuntary sob caught between heartbreak and disbelief. I pressed my hand to my mouth, startled by its escape. Outside, Lena must have heard something because the air stilled. Then, low and strained, Marcus said, "Don't talk about her that way. You don't understand what she's given up." When the front door opened, my instinct was to flee the kitchen, but my legs refused. I froze there, half-turned, the air thick with the scent of overcooked rice and disappointment. Marcus walked in first, his eyes wide when they found me by the table, half-lit by the yellow lamp. His lips parted, but no words came. Behind him, Lena stood at the threshold, face pale, mascara fragile around her eyes. "I heard enough," I said softly, my voice surprisingly steady. Silence fell heavy between us, broken only by the slow ticking of the wall clock. Lena's eyes welled up. "Mrs. Winslow, please. Don't," I interrupted gently. Not sharp, not cruel, just final. "Please don't. I'm too tired for explanations tonight." Marcus stepped forward, shame carved into every line of his face. "Mom, she didn't mean." "Marcus, stop." I folded my arms, not in anger but in protection, like I was holding something inside that might spill if I wasn't careful. When a woman feels she has to buy love, something's already broken before it begins. Tears slipped down Lena's cheeks. "I swear, I just wanted you to like me." "I did," I whispered. "I liked you when you sat here and laughed about that burned cornbread. I liked you when you offered to help me wash dishes. You didn't have to wrap yourself up to be seen." She looked at Marcus, desperate. I thought she'd. He turned his face away. "Stop, Lena. Just stop." The air went silent again. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. I could see in Marcus's eyes that the image he'd built of her, the gentle dream he'd promised himself, was breaking apart, and he didn't know whether to grieve her or himself. Love can crumble quietly, not with shouting, but with the soft acknowledgement that it isn't what you thought. Lena reached for my hand, trembling. "Please, don't hate me for trying too hard." I looked at her small, shaking fingers, jeweled and manicured, and thought of all the quiet women before her who tried to decorate insecurity with kindness. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I do pity the part of you that thought you had to earn worth by spending it." Marcus swallowed hard, the sound thick in the hush. Mom, maybe you should rest. His voice was broken glass and honey mixed together. I nodded. Rest was the only thing left to do. Without a word, I walked to the hall closet, dragged out an empty cardboard box, and began gathering Lena's gifts, each one glowing faintly in the lamplight, as if they might whisper apologies if I touched them too gently. The silk scarf. The tea tin. The little gold charm shaped like a thimble. Even the lotion still unopened. They went in one by one, small elegies for misplaced intention. Lena stayed near the doorway, silently crying as Marcus stared at the floor. I didn't want grand gestures or last words. I simply needed to remove the noise her generosity had made in my home. The box filled quickly, and before I closed the lid, I paused, running my fingers once more across the scarf she'd said reminded her of me. Its texture felt smooth and cool against my skin, beautiful, but strange in my hands. What broke me wasn't the gold or the silk, it was realizing how easily love can be mistaken for a transaction. That night, the house was still except for the occasional creak of settling floorboards. I placed the sealed box by the back door, meaning to take it to the church donation bin in the morning. Sleep came in fits, my mind replaying each detail until the air itself seemed heavy with regret. Just before dawn, I heard footsteps in the hallway, the hesitant kind, careful on wooden floors. Marcus stood by my bedroom doorway, his silhouette faint against the growing light. His voice, when it came, was quiet and heartbreakingly tired. "Mom," he said, "can we talk about this?" I pushed myself up, heart aching for him and for what we'd lost in one evening. "We can try," I murmured. He hesitated, fingers flexing by his sides. "But first, I need to ask you something." He took a breath that trembled at the edges. "Did you really have to accept those gifts?" The question hung between us, the ghosts of ribbon and perfume rising around it. But nothing prepared me for what Marcus asked the next morning. Marcus sat at the kitchen table the morning after the storm, his hands pressed flat against the wood like something invisible might slide out from beneath them if he let go. The sun had risen shyly, hesitant to touch the space between us. The box of Lena's gifts still leaned against the back door where I'd left it, sealed shut with the same resolve I wished I felt. He didn't speak at first, just stared down at the grain of the table as if reading something hidden in it. When he finally looked up, the weight in his eyes startled me. It was the look of a child who's seen too much too soon. "Mom," he said quietly, "I know last night was a lot. But I keep thinking about something." He swallowed. "When you accepted those gifts, did you ever wonder what they meant? Or," his voice cracked, "did you just like the attention?" The question landed like a second heartbreak, quieter, but deeper. I blinked, searching for air. He must have seen my face pale because he lowered his gaze quickly. "I didn't mean it cruelly," he muttered. Lena said you always looked so grateful. It makes me wonder if maybe, after Dad, maybe you just missed being cared for." It was the kind of sentence you can't answer immediately, not because it lacks truth, but because it finds you unguarded. My throat tightened, my heartbeat felt hollow against my ribs. "Marcus," I whispered, "you think I accepted those gifts because I was lonely?" He hesitated. "I think, you've always given so much. Maybe you just wanted anyone to give back." I stood slowly, the legs of my chair scraping across the floor in a soft complaint. My hands trembled as I braced them against the counter. "Son," I said carefully, "if you think I welcomed lies into my home just to fill an empty space, then you don't know your mother as well as I thought you did." He exhaled, head bowing in shame. "I'm sorry. That's not what I meant." But the damage was done not by malice, but by innocence. There's a kind of hurt that comes only from love, when those you've poured yourself into hold up a mirror that reflects you in fragments you'd rather not see. We sat in that silence for a long time, the clock ticking like judgment. I turned to look out the window, the morning light spilled across the countertop, illuminating the faint scratches from years of family dinners and mended moments. That counter had seen every kind of love, truthful and distorted. I finally said, "No woman should have to question whether kindness is real, Marcus. But I'll tell you this, if I ever mistake a gift for love again, it won't be because I'm desperate, it'll be because I believed too much in goodness." His lips parted as if to speak, But words failed him. I could see the guilt drumming behind his eyes. I reached for his shoulder, lightly, not to comfort but to steady both of us. "This isn't about Lena anymore," I murmured. "It's about what kind of woman I refuse to become." I turned toward the box by the door. "I'm taking these back to her." "Mom, you don't have to." "I do." He nodded, though his eyes glistened. There was no stopping me once resolve found its footing. I dressed simply jeans, cotton blouse, the old cardigan Daniel used to tease me about because of its missing button. Dignity doesn't need decoration. Lena met me at a small cafe downtown. I called ahead, my voice calm, telling her I'd like to talk. She sounded surprised but agreed. I arrived early, choosing a corner table where sunlight grazed the scarred mahogany surface. When she entered, I almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, hair pulled back into a tight bun, her face raw beneath its composure. I stood and offered a nod. "Thank you for meeting me." She sat carefully, folding her hands around a cup that hadn't yet been filled. "Marcus told me you wanted to return my things." Her voice was small. "They aren't yours anymore." "They never really were," I replied, setting the box between us. "You said you wanted to help family. But love doesn't trade in installments, Lena." Her jaw tightened, but her eyes lowered, lashes trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. I just wanted you to like me." "I did," I said softly. "You don't have to buy kindness from people who already want to see you happy." She shook her head quickly, her voice breaking. "No, you don't understand. I wasn't trying to buy you. Her eyes gleamed with tears. "I thought that's what people notice. My mom raised me that way, to earn your place, to fit into someone's world by being useful. If you can't be enough, at least be impressive, right?" I leaned back, watching the vulnerable truths unravel from her. Truth rarely enters a room calmly, it arrives trembling. "Lena," I said after a pause, "impressive fades. Real stays. Marcus loved you before you spent a dime on either of us. And you could have had me simply by showing up honestly." Tears slid past her perfectly shaped cheekbones. She looked younger then, stripped of all performance. "I didn't mean to make you feel small." "I know you didn't," I replied. "But you did. And I let it happen because I didn't trust my discomfort enough to speak sooner." The waitress dropped off coffee for both of us, hesitating at the charged air before quietly walking away. For a moment, we sipped in silence. The bitterness grounded me. Finally, Lena whispered, "I'm losing him, aren't I?" "You might," I said honestly. "Because love built on impressions eventually collapses under its own weight." Her shoulders slumped. "I thought I was doing what any good woman would do, showing I could take care of the people I love." "That may be so," I said gently, "but when you use things to prove love, you teach people to see you through possessions, not patience." She wiped her cheeks, her voice shaking. "I was so proud when Marcus said you liked me, Mrs. Winslow. I grew up watching my own mother struggle to be enough for her husband's family. I promised myself I'd never be looked down on for being poor or awkward." "Child," I murmured, the word slipping out of habit rather than superiority. "You could bring the whole world wrapped in gold, but if you're handing it with fear, anyone who's truly lived will see through it." Something softened in her eyes then. Vulnerability has a way of leveling the ground between strangers. For the first time, I saw Lena not as a manipulator, but as another woman caught in the same desperate tug for affection in a world too quick to measure worth in glitter. "I'll give these things away," I told her, tapping the box. "Someone else might need them more. But I came here because I wanted to return something else to your shame. It doesn't belong to me." Her mouth quivered, but she managed a nod. "I'm sorry," she said again, smaller now, all her guard dismantled. "I know," I whispered. "But you aren't the only one who needs to say that." Her eyes rose to mine, questioning. I continued, softly, "I should have seen you as a daughter-in-law in progress, not a woman on trial. Maybe my loneliness made me judge you too kindly, maybe my pride made me too slow to confront you. Either way, we both failed honesty." By then, both of our coffees had gone cold. The conversation had stripped us of warmth, but left us capable of something far sturdier understanding. When I stood to leave, Lena reached across the table, her hand catching mine. "Thank you for not yelling," she whispered. "I don't think I could have survived it." I smiled faintly. "Yelling's easy. Forgiveness is work." I carried the box out with me, lighter somehow, though my arms still trembled from fatigue. Outside, the wind tugged at my cardigan, and the sun crept high enough to sting my eyes. I walked 3 blocks to the church charity bin and slid every gift inside, one by one. The thud of each landing felt like an exhale, final but freeing. When I turned to head home, the world seemed quieter, stripped of false shimmer but brighter for it. At home, Marcus was sitting on the porch steps waiting. He looked like a boy again, elbows on knees, chin low. When he saw me, he stood. "You went to see her." "I did." "What happened?" "Honesty," I said simply. He lowered his gaze. "She said she's sorry." "I believe her." "She said she doesn't deserve me." I sighed, setting a gentle hand on his arm. "Maybe she doesn't, but that's for life to decide, not pride." He looked up at me, the same brown eyes that once trusted me to know every answer. "And what about you, Mom? You okay?" "No," I said truthfully, "but I'm cleaner inside." For the first time in days, he smiled faintly. "You always find the quiet way to be brave." I sat beside him on the step, our shoulders touching, watching the breeze scatter leaves across the yard Daniel once mowed. The world felt both hollow and whole. I thought of Lena's shaken hands, Marcus's cracking voice, my own reflection in the window, 3 people tangled in good intentions gone wrong. In trying to buy acceptance, each of us had only revealed how unloved we truly felt. The engagement dinner was held 2 weeks later at a downtown restaurant. Lena had chosen herself a narrow, candlelit place with tall mirrors and white linen tablecloths that stretched like riverbanks of formality. I remember standing inside the entrance, my reflection doubled and softened in the glass, the air heavy with rosemary, roasted lamb, and the hum of expensive chatter. Marcus reached for my coat, his smile practiced but tired. He looked cleaned up, pressed, contained, but I could see how the quiet had settled behind his eyes. When Lena appeared from across the room, she looked beautiful in a way that felt deliberate. Her dress was a deep wine color, her hair pinned back to reveal delicate earrings that caught the light when she tilted her head. She looked every bit the poised hostess. Only her hands betrayed her, each movement a fraction too controlled, fingers tapping the stem of her glass, a rhythm to keep her steady. Family and a few close friends filled the room. Uncle Raymond sat at the far end, already halfway through a story about some sailing trip. My neighbor Mrs. Caldwell adjusted her pearls and whispered a compliment about the decor. As dishes began to arrive, I caught fragments of laughter and clinking silver smiles painted a little too wide, like we were all pretending not to sense the fault line running beneath the evening. Lena fluttered from guest to guest, making sure plates were filled, glasses topped off. When she came to me, she touched my shoulder gently. "Mrs. Winslow, thank you for coming," she said. Her voice trembled, almost imperceptibly. "Of course," I replied. "Marcus wanted this to be special." She nodded, holding my gaze for a second longer than manners required, her expression softening into something that looked like apology. She moved on quickly, greeting Uncle Raymond with a brightness that felt forced. The meal unfolded slowly, every course an act in some fragile play. Between bites of steak and murmured conversation, I found my thoughts wandering. People said truth clears the air. They never mentioned how dense it still feels before it breaks. Halfway through dinner, the toasts began. Uncle Raymond raised his glass first, cheerful, oblivious. To the future Mr. and Mrs. Winslow, he began with a laugh. "May your partnership be prosperous in every sense." A few people chuckled, though Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. When it was Lena's turn, she stood abruptly, the movement knocking her chair lightly against the polished floor. The sound cut through the laughter like a sudden gust closing a window. She picked up her glass, but her fingers shook, and she quickly set it back down. She started, then paused. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It means so much to Marcus and me." Her voice wavered, I saw her swallow hard. The candles flickered across the tableware, shadows bending and doubling on the wall behind her. Around us, conversation stilled. Even the waiter froze by the door, sensing a shift. Marcus and I have had a lot of time to think about what it means to build a life together, she continued. Her words came slower now, deliberate, trembling around the edges. And sometimes, growth means facing things we wish we'd done differently. My breath caught. Marcus looked up, startled. He opened his mouth to stop her, perhaps to rescue her from herself, but she shook her head faintly. Let me. She turned to address the room fully, her voice gaining an odd, raw steadiness. I need to say something before this goes any further. The truth is I haven't been honest. About what my intentions were, about how I tried to earn love instead of simply being worthy of it. I thought if I gave enough, bought enough, impressed enough, I could belong somewhere. A slow whisper spread through the room. Uncle Raymond straightened in his seat. Mrs. Caldwell's fork hovered midair. I hurt people in the process, Lena continued. Her gaze flicked toward me, and I felt it like a touch. I hurt someone who only ever offered kindness. I tried to make an impression when all she wanted was connection. Her voice cracked then, and she lowered her head. Sylvia, I'm sorry for how I made you feel. You were right, I let fear decide who I wanted to be. For a breath, no one spoke. The restaurant's soft music felt suddenly too delicate for the thickness of that truth. Marcus stood slowly beside her, one hand on her back. His eyes glistened, a mixture of pride and sorrow. Lena, he murmured, but she barely heard him. I could feel every gaze in the room shifting toward me, waiting for reaction, the wounded mother, the offended matriarch, the moral anchor. My pulse thudded in my ears like rain on a tin roof. I could have stood up and left quietly. I could have accepted her apology with silence and saved us all from discomfort. Instead, I found myself rising, the linen napkin fluttering from my lap to the floor. Thank you, Lena, I said gently, my voice carrying more calm than I felt. It takes courage to speak truth when it costs you something. Her head lifted, eyes wet. There's no life worth building that doesn't stumble through mistakes, I went on. We all reach for closeness in clumsy ways. Some of us give too little, others give too much. A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus reached for his fiancée's hand. She took it hesitantly. I accept your apology, I said. Not because forgetting is easy, but because it's the only way we get to grow past what we're ashamed of. The air shifted, softened. The tension that had clung to the dinner table dissolved, replaced by the faint relief of oxygen returning. I sat down slowly. Across from me, Uncle Raymond cleared his throat awkwardly and lifted his glass again, murmuring a half-hearted toast to honesty and second chances. The laughter that followed was fragile, but it was human. Conversation resumed in cautious murmurs. The waiter reappeared, visibly relieved, pouring wine with exaggerated care. Marcus caught my eye and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded once, the gesture small but whole. As dessert arrived, tiny cakes arranged like little apologies, Lena excused herself to the restroom. Marcus followed a few minutes later, visibly restless, maybe worried she'd fall apart. I sat alone for a moment, listening to the rustle of napkins, the slow scrape of cutlery, the muffled city sounds beyond the frosted windows. I studied the reflections in the wine glasses, the flicker of candlelight, the muted colors of our faces. Somewhere in all that shimmer was the story of how love rearranges itself when pride finally sits down and listens. When Marcus and Lena returned, they didn't sit right away. She leaned down beside me, voice thin but sincere. "Thank you for not embarrassing me." I smiled faintly. "You did the brave part yourself." Her hand lingered on my shoulder for a breath before she returned to her seat. For the rest of the evening, she didn't try to impress anyone. She laughed quietly, listened more than she spoke, and for the first time, I believed I was seeing her rather than her reflection. As guests began leaving, there was no grand farewell. People hugged in the polite, uncertain way small towns do after a storm, warmer, but still cautious. The sound of heels clacking on tile blended with the faint music overhead. Marcus stayed behind to settle the bill. He approached me near the doorway, his tie loosened, exhaustion softening his sharp features. I don't know what we would have done if you'd walked out, he said. You might have learned sooner how to walk back in, I replied with a small smile. He let out a quiet laugh, more breath than sound, and kissed my forehead. I understand now, he whispered as he pulled away. Why did used to say you're the strongest woman he's ever known? You don't fight storms, you wait them out until they know who they're dealing with. I chuckled softly. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to get soaked. He shook his head, smiling down. No. You just know everything looks clearer after the rain. Outside, the air had cooled, twilight dissolved into the low hum of streetlights. I stepped out first, leaving Marcus and Lena talking softly behind me. Their silhouettes through the window looked small, uncertain, and yet, somehow, starting over. That night, as the last guests trickled out, I knew our little family would never look quite the same, but maybe that was the point. Seasons in a small town shift slower than on calendars. You don't see the change until one day you step outside and notice the lights turned softer, the air kinder. By midsummer, months had passed since the engagement dinner, and life carried on the way it always does, quietly, insistently, without permission. Marcus came by every Sunday afternoon. He'd help me prune the rosebushes or sit on the porch swing, both of us sipping sweet tea while the heat hummed around us. He seldom mentioned Lena anymore, though her name floated through the pauses between our sentences like music from a room down the hall, faint, familiar, and fading. I didn't ask for updates. Some wounds need silence more than conversation. One day, as we shelled peas together, he said softly, "We've decided to take some time apart." No dramatics, no bitterness. Just a quiet truth placed between us like a fragile thing he wasn't sure would hold. I nodded, my fingers still working the pods. "I'm sorry, son," I said, meaning it. He shrugged lightly. "Don't be. She's figuring herself out. And I guess I needed to do the same." For a moment, the sound of peas bouncing into the bowl filled the space where sadness tried to form. It wasn't heartbreak anymore, it was somewhere between acceptance and permission. He looked over at me, eyes soft. "I know I hurt you that morning, when I asked if you just liked the attention. I still think about it." I reached out and placed my hand over his. "You were trying to understand me. I forgive that." He smiled, relief loosening his jaw. "You always do." I laughed gently. "Maybe. But don't get used to it." From then on, small ordinary things became monuments of recovery. The morning coffee simmered without stirring up old memories. My sewing table remained untouched for entire days while I ventured into the garden, letting soil replace fabric beneath my hands. The earth was patient. It asked for tending but never apology. I planted marigolds, basil, and a row of zinnias that burst in colors loud enough to remind me living things don't fear being too much. I found comfort in that, a beauty that makes no excuses for itself. Inside, the house had changed too. The empty corner where the box of gifts once stood now held a ceramic pot of lavender. When sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, the tiny purple blooms caught it just right, filling the room with scent instead of silence. I'd taken the luxury bag, the bracelet, and the unopened phone to the charity drive last month. Watching the volunteers sort through donations, I realized I didn't feel resentment or nostalgia, just a careful kind of gratitude. Each object that once whispered confusion now spoke of release. The scarf might warm someone else's neck, the perfume might cling to a stranger and make her feel noticed. Love, even mistaken, should travel until it finds its rightful home. In quieter moments, I still thought of Lena, not with anger, but with hope. I imagined her somewhere learning the difference between giving and proving. Maybe she'd call one day, maybe she wouldn't. Both possibilities fit comfortably in my chest now. Every Sunday morning, I still went to church, sitting in the same pew Daniel and I once claimed. During prayer, I didn't ask for answers anymore. Only clarity. There's a line between pain and purpose so thin you often can't see it until you're on the far side of both. That was my clarity. Sometimes, as the hymns faded, I'd picture Daniel's gentle grin, the way his eyes crinkled when he said, "You take care of people too well, Sylvie. Be sure someone takes care of you too." Back then, I thought he meant Marcus. Now I think he meant me. One evening, As golden light stretched across the living room, Marcus arrived with 2 cardboard boxes from his apartment. "Old stuff I don't know what to do with," he said, setting them down. We sifted through together: notebooks, photographs, an old college jersey. At the bottom of one box was a small velvet pouch. Lena's engagement ring. He picked it up, turning it in his fingers. The diamond caught the late sun, scattering prisms across the wall. Then, without drama, he placed the pouch back, closed the lid, and said, "I'll sell it. Maybe donate the money." His tone was steady, peaceful. "That sounds right," I said. We spent the rest of the evening making dinner: simple food, fried okra and cornbread, the kind Daniel used to say could fix anything but a guilty conscience. We didn't talk about the past, only nodded at it from a distance. The kitchen smelled of pepper and oil and ordinary life, and that was enough. After he left, the house settled into its familiar quiet. The clock ticked softly above the sink, and the wind carried the faint chirp of summer crickets. I sat by the window, watching dusk spill across the garden I'd built slowly, one forgiving seed at a time. That night, I wrote a letter not to send, just to release. "Dear Lena, if grace finds you before regret does, believe it is meant to. You taught me that generosity can hide fear, and fear can look an awful lot like love. But you also reminded me that kindness, however misguided, is still a form of reaching for good. I wish you peace and enough self-worth to stop buying your place in the world when it's already yours for the keeping." I folded the letter and tucked it into my Bible, right beside that old tin box of Marcus's childhood notes, the ones that said, "Mom, you're enough." Funny how life circles back to the same truths, only this time, I finally believed them. As the evening deepened, I thought about forgiveness. It had stretched across months, spilled into days that taught me more about myself than about others. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's clearing the wreckage so you can see where the light comes through. I turned off the lamp and lingered at the window for a moment longer. The lavender pot caught what little moonlight filtered in, and I smiled. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't giving someone a second chance, it's freeing yourself from needing the first to be perfect. You know, my dear, when I look back on that year, it doesn't feel like heartbreak anymore. It feels like pruning season, painful, necessary, beautiful in what it left behind. I used to think love was proved through effort, through what we could give or endure. But now I know love, the honest kind, is quiet. It simply exists where truth is allowed to breathe. When I think of Lena now, I don't see the girl with gold ribbons and planned smiles. I see a frightened young woman trying her best to be seen, her hands trembling from years of being told she was too much and never enough. I see reflections of myself in her, the me who patched everyone's tears but left her own to fray. Maybe that's what life keeps teaching us, that the people who seem the hardest to understand are often carrying familiar sorrows in unfamiliar wrapping. Marcus has moved on now. Work keeps him busy, his laughter lighter these days. When he comes by, he teases me about the lavender plant that's nearly taken over my windowsill. "You sure you're not trying to start a farm, Mom?" he says. I just smile and tell him every good thing grows best when tended daily: faith, hope, forgiveness, and lavender alike. Sometimes at night, I sit here at my old kitchen table, the same one that held our tears that first morning, and I think about how far we've traveled in spirit. I pour myself a little tea, the store-bought kind, still my favorite, and I let the quiet settle around me like a quilt. I think about gifts, how some come wrapped in ribbons, others in lessons, and the most precious ones in silence after storms. People often ask me if I'd do anything differently. I suppose I wouldn't. Not because it was painless, but because even hurt can become holy when you let it teach you humility. Every misunderstanding, every swallowed word, every too generous gesture, it all led me here, to a peace that doesn't need price tags. There's something I've come to believe with certainty: love isn't measured by how much we give. It's measured by how freely we give it without fear. Lena gave with fear. I received with guilt. And poor Marcus, caught between us, tried to balance the weight of two versions of love that didn't know how to stand still. But time, sweet time, teaches you that balance doesn't come from perfection, it comes from surrender. I remember one afternoon, not long ago, when the mailman delivered a small brown parcel with no return address. Inside was a jar of homemade jam and a note written in familiar penmanship, "For your garden mornings. Thank you for your grace." No signature. But I didn't need one. I made toast that morning, spread the jam, and smiled through a few quiet tears. Not of sadness, but something softer, maybe relief that life really does loop back sometimes, handing you closure in mason jars when words can't find their way. And so, my dear listener, if there's one truth to take from my story tonight, let it be this: generosity without sincerity will always sound like coins dropped into an empty well. It makes noise, but it never fills the silence. Real kindness, the kind that heals, it arrives gentle without spectacle, without boasting. It arrives with your name spoken softly, and your worth not up for debate. If anyone ever hands you love that weighs more than it warms, be brave enough to set it down. That doesn't make you ungrateful, it makes you wise. Because sometimes, people wrap guilt in ribbons and call it love. But a true gift never needs glitter, it only needs heart. These days, I don't have much that sparkles. My home is small, my tea's simple, and my hands have grown slower with age. But they're steady. They know what's real now. Every stitch I sew, every flower I tend, every kind word I share, it all comes from a heart unbowed and unburdened. If my story found its way to your heart tonight, take it as a little reminder from an old mother: before you thank someone for their gifts, thank yourself for knowing your worth. Because that's the gift you keep, the one you never have to return. And as you close your eyes this evening, may your heart feel lighter. May you learn to give without losing yourself, and to receive without doubting that you deserve the good that comes your way. I'll sit here a while longer, listen to the crickets through my kitchen window, and whisper a quiet prayer for every soul out there who's ever tried to buy or earn love when it was already waiting inside them all along. Good night, my dear. May grace find you right where you are, and may you always know the difference between a gift and a gesture, between love that costs and love that frees.